welcome to this week's Tom Baker Show. This show, as always, being powered by Miller Tech. If you need a battery to power your weekend experience, whether it's with your RV, your golf cart, your boat, or just in your campsite, Miller Tech lithium batteries comes with a no-hassle 10-year warranty. It is an Amish-owned company, so you know you are getting the best. MillerTechEnergy.com is the website. Please visit, and you can get 10% off your order with the code NASCAR10. This show is a show that I wish I didn't have to do. This show is going to be a celebration of the life of Kyle Busch, one of NASCAR's all-time greatest drivers, who passed away suddenly just prior to Coke 600 weekend in Charlotte of pneumonia. And I'm going to bring in our editor, as always, from SWN, Jacob Seelman, to help with this. And this show is going to contain several voices that you'll be hearing from, who will be talking about their memories and their thoughts on Kyle and his passing. But we start, Jacob, as always, with the Miller Tech Power Performance Award. There is no question who this week's recipient is.
No, there's not. I think you just have to sit down, and I perused through about 10 or 12 different Seelman stats of the week, and any one of them would be special. You compile them all together, like you said, it's no contest. You honor Kyle Busch in a lot of ways. This is one of them. I mean, when you look at his career as a collective, it's unbelievable. 234 National Series wins across NASCAR's top 3 series. That's far and away a record. 2 Cup Series championships, 2015 and 2019, and a NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series championship back in the nationwide sponsorship days. He was the all-time wins leader in what's now the O'Reilly Series, the only one over 100. All-time Craftsman Truck Series winner with 69, the most recent of those, which came at Dover just 6 days before we lost him. And as an owner, he started Kyle Busch Motorsports. His teams, when you include him and all the other drivers that raced for KBM, won 100 races. No other Truck Series organization ever did that. 70 poles for that organization. No team has done that in the Truck Series. 7 Truck Series owners' titles. That's a record. 2 drivers' titles, one with Christopher Bell, one with Eric Jones. An ARCA championship, the owner's title in 2022. They even won an O'Reilly race with brother Kurt back in 2012. And Kyle, as 2 as a driver, 2 more as an owner, 4 super late model crown jewels in the Snowball Derby. I mean, this team, this driver did everything, and that's a power performance as a career, not just as one moment. And I feel like as I start to think, Tom, about Kyle, that's, he wasn't just one moment. He became a force of nature, both on and off the racetrack. And that, combined with how sudden this was, I think is the first chapter of why this is so tough for all of us to swallow. I mean, this was not just a shock. This was a sledgehammer, I feel like, Thursday evening when we first got the news.
Yeah, to say the least. You think about the Charlotte area, you think about Mooresville. It's Race City, USA. It's home to so many racers, not just in NASCAR, but from all walks of the sport. And it's also a relatively small town. And so, news travels very quickly. And when you called me to tell me what you had just been told, obviously everything in that moment just stops. I mean, when you hear something like this, And especially when it's someone of the stature of Kyle Busch, and it's something that was so unexpected. I mean, there was nothing that we'd been told that led to this, other than, that day he had, been hospitalized with an illness, and Austin Hill was going to drive the car. And so we all thought that, Kyle would just, would be in the hospital for a bit. He'd get better and he'd come back. I mean, there was no warning. There was nothing that even remotely suggested that this was a life-threatening situation. And before we could hardly react to that news, we got the news that he was gone, and it happened so quickly, and it was so close to one of the signature weekends. The Coke 600 weekend is everybody's kind of hometown break in the season, and it's Memorial Day, and it's already heavy, and you're thinking about those who gave us the freedom to be able to go to the racetrack and enjoy the races, and then all of a sudden this hits you out of nowhere like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, it did. And I think not just because of who Kyle was and everything that he accomplished, but you stop and think that this is the first passing of an active Cup Series driver from any cause on or off track since Dale Earnhardt Sr. in the Daytona 500 25 years ago. I mean, this is just not something that happens these days, in large part because of how safe our race cars are, but just in general, we don't lose people like this seemingly out of nowhere, which, like you said, it was a total gut punch in every sense of the word. As we got to the racetrack then Friday morning, I mean, we all knew going in the weather was going to be sketchy. Friday was very much proof, I think, that the entire sport needed a day to grieve, the rain washing everything out. But I mean, Tom, I think what was most striking to me, and I'm curious how you felt about it, is just I said to somebody walking into the day that I had not felt that numb personally since that week after Dale Sr. passed in 2001, and I felt like this was kind of a living recollection of that next week in 2001 at Rockingham. Just, nobody knew what to think, nobody knew what to do. It just, you looked around, and I personally felt a little bit lost on Friday at the racetrack, honestly.
Yeah, I think we all did. It just for those who don't really kind of understand, you may see what we do, but what our environment is. We're in a room in the media center. It's called the Deadline Room, and there's probably, I don't know, 100 of us or so in there. And Friday's always a lighter day than Sunday, for example. But everybody, we, even as we would sort of, say hi to each other, or everybody just, I think we were all just looking for the right thing to say. We were all looking for the right way to be, the right way to act. What do we do? There were no drivers around, really. It was rainy all day. It was gloomy. It was just sad. And so you sit there and you're in the middle of this heavy environment, and you just don't really know what to do or how to think. And, it just was a really, really, really down day. It was hard you really felt sad. It just genuinely wasn't a day to be excited about being at the racetrack in my view of it. we were there because it's what we do, and you're trying to do the best that you can, but it just was really a very heavy mental toll that I think it took on, I'm sure, everybody inside of the track.
Yeah, and to best illustrate this, really Friday started, as we got later into the day, and it became pretty well apparent that we probably weren't going to run the Truck Series race that night, and we ultimately didn't. But that afternoon, right around dinner time, we actually got a visit in the deadline room from new NASCAR CEO Steve O'Donnell, who we're going to start kind of the recollection in voice of what Kyle Busch meant with an excerpt from Steve's remarks, because I felt like he summed it up, at least in that first moment of the weekend, better than anybody else could have, going back pretty much most of Kyle's adult life in motorsports with him, and now being at the helm of the sport. Steve just really took the first step to kind of give voice, give emotion to what this meant. So before we go any further in this tribute show, let's hear from a little of what Steve O'Donnell had to say regarding Kyle Busch.
Kyle Busch lived just about every chapter of what you can do in NASCAR. What most people saw, rowdy, he's fierce, he's competitive, always good for a great quote. My favorite interview Kyle Busch ever gave, and I wish I could do it every weekend, and I know most of you probably hated it, but everything's great. And he just kept saying it over and over and over again. That's Kyle. One of my favorite moments as well, back in Texas. He would challenge NASCAR on some rules. Maybe spun out, maybe hit the wall, decided that we needed to take him to the care center, laid flat out on a pit cart, made fun of us. I was mad at the time, but I look back, and that was damn funny, and that was Kyle. Always good to egg on the fans, played that villain, and was a winner. And the iconic bow, I think we're all going to remember as well. So his stats speak for themselves, right? He's a two-time champion. He's won more National Series races than anyone in our history, and no doubt first ballot Hall of Famer for sure. But what few people saw was what Kyle also did off the track, because he didn't talk about it a lot. And one of those examples I'd give to all of you is everybody knows, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this, but Daniel Suarez comes over from Mexico, learning English, learning how to race at the National Series level, struggling. Received a call every week from Kyle Busch. Never talked about it, just how do I make you better? How do I keep things going? Kyle Busch started a Truck Series team that we all know was hugely successful, and that's wins on the racetrack. But what people new to the sport don't know is if you go up and down pit road on Sunday, you're going to see a lot of people that came through that. What you're also going to see is a lot of people behind the wheel on Sunday who came through that. He gave people a chance. He started the Bundle of Joy Foundation with Samantha because he knew how difficult it was to start a family, and he wanted to spread that message, and yet had time to be a philanthropist off the track. I think we all saw, right, when he won last week at Dover, the quote from Victory Lane. It's tough to watch, right? It's telling. But what I look back on is a text from Kyle Tuesday, as only Kyle could do, and I keep looking at it. And he said, hey, man, what do you think about an over 40 rule to be able to compete in all the Truck Series races next year? And I said, we put that rule in place because you're winning so much. But when we looked about it and we had a meeting Wednesday internally, and we said, well, damn, that's actually good. We need Kyle in the Truck Series. And it was twofold, because he knew he could help the series, but I think one day had a dream to race against his son in a National Series event. And that was Kyle, always thinking about the sport and going forward. So, I want to recognize a few folks we're obviously thinking about as an industry, and first and foremost, everyone at Richard Childress Racing, Judy and Richard, Mike and Allie Verlander. Mike, I don't know how he's dealing. He working with Kyle through the Truck Series, working at RCR, a great human being, And our thoughts are certainly with them, but all of the team back at the shop, those who are working on engineering, the crew members, excuse me, who put those cars together each and every week. Those guys lost a teammate, and that's not lost on us that we're thinking about all of them. You know, the sport and all of us grew up and watched Kyle be a racer, but we watched him become a husband and a father the same way we watched him become a champion, and we all did that as a family. We were all part of that. Kyle's parents, Kurt, Samantha's parents, all thinking about you for sure. And Samantha, Brexton, and Lennox are not just family of a NASCAR legend. They are part of the NASCAR family, and they always will be, because that's what family does. And when I talked about the family reunion part, and I think personally about Kyle Busch and NASCAR. And to me, Kyle Busch just defines what it means to be a racer in NASCAR. Everything about it, the fire, the greatness, the heart that sometimes you rarely saw. The sport was truly lucky to have him. And I believe I can speak for everybody in the sport, and I'll just say this, for me personally, the family reunions week to week are just not going to be the same without him, but we're going to do our damn best to continue his legacy and support his family.
Welcome back. And Jacob, I just, hearing Steve's remarks live and watching his demeanor, it just felt so appropriate, the things that he said, and I thought he handled that initial press conference very, very appropriately and very humbly and beautifully.
He did, and two things to me stuck out there. First, at the very beginning, that Steve said, you know, Kyle Busch lived pretty much every chapter of what it meant to be in NASCAR, and we did. We saw him grow up from an 18-year-old kid to really an adult, a family man, you know, in front of our eyes. And then, you know, the second part to this that I thought of at the end was, you know, where he talked about the, you know, the family aspect, kind of the family reunion of what it means to be in NASCAR, and that, you know, some of that was what you rarely saw, but because of that, even if you rarely saw it, how lucky the sport was to have him, and that, yes, the sport's not going to be the same, but that all of us are going to do our best to continue his legacy and support his family. And we'll talk more about that part of it later in the show, but it just... everything Steve said, I feel like, set the tone for the rest of the entire experience through the weekend.
Yeah, I agree 100%. He really did a nice job with that. We're going to step aside. When we come back, we're going to hear from some drivers sharing their thoughts on the weekend and on Kyle, and we'll continue to talk about the weekend that was, and one of the greatest of all time, Kyle Busch, passing away. And we'll be back with more of the show right after this.
MillerTech builds lithium batteries for RVs, golf carts, boats, and off-grid life. Reliable power, long lifespan, and a 10-year warranty. That's why I trust MillerTech. MillerTech, powering your adventure.
For race fans across the United States, GetInTheStands.com is the place to find racetracks where you live and where you're traveling. Just go to GetInTheStands.com and enter your location. You'll see the tracks within 100 miles of that point, either as a list or on a map. GetInTheStands.com is 100% free to use and mobile friendly. So whether you're on a computer, a tablet, or on your phone, there's no need to download an app. To find racetracks across the United States, open your web browser and head to GetInTheStands.com. GetInTheStands.com, your racetrack directory.
Attention track and series owners, elevate your fan experience with the TrackTune app. TrackTune works with your PA system. Fans and teams at the track can hear the announcers through their phones, ensuring everyone hears race calls, sponsor plugs, and more during race nights. It's simple to set up, affordable, and free for fans to download and enjoy. Visit tracktune.live for all the details and join Tracks nationwide on the app today.
Welcome back to this very special edition of the Tom Baker Show as we celebrate the life and share memories of one of the greatest of all time, Kyle Busch, who passed away leading into Memorial Day weekend. Jacob, as we begin our America's Racers segment, no more a racer that represented the hard work and grit and determination and passion that America and Americans are so known for than Kyle Busch. And we will now begin to hear from just a few of the drivers who either raced with him, raced for him, raced against him, but all, seem to share some very common sentiments about Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually get to start with a young driver in Connor Zilic who didn't get to race a lot with Kyle, but was one of the drivers in listening to everything he said throughout the weekend that was really inspired by, and I feel like took a lot from watching what Kyle did on the racetrack, and particularly, as Connor got into Cup this year, and Kyle was part of Chevrolet and the manufacturer side on RCR, had some humorous memory and an impactful memory with KB, and I'm not going to spoil the story. We'll just go to the tape and hear from Connor Zilic about both the lighthearted and the tenacity that was Kyle Busch.
What was your favorite Kyle Busch memory?
I think favorite, I would say probably, he texts me after. I have two. I have a good, like a real funny one and a good one. But he texted me after I lost the championship last year, and just told me how proud he was of me and just how far I'd come. And that meant a lot. He didn't have to reach out and do that. And yeah, he wrote a few paragraphs and just kind of gave me some confidence after what was a really tough day for me. So that one meant a lot. And then we were at the Daytona 500 this year, and we do a Chevy driver meeting before the race. And I was in the drivers meeting. It was my first one as a Cup driver, and I asked if we were the last group of OEM to pit, what should the plan be? If are we going to try and block the track and try and keep track position after the pit cycle? And I asked that question. It was like the end of the meeting, and everybody kind of went silent. Nobody was answering me. And Kyle speaks up, and he goes, "No, just get the out of the way." And I was like, and it's my first time in one of these meetings. I'm a rookie, and I'm just like, "Oh, okay, yep, sorry." I was so embarrassed. But yeah, that was just who Kyle was. He was unapologetically himself, and some people didn't like him, some people liked him, but everybody respected him, and that's the Kyle that we'll remember.
How would you describe Kyle's driving style?
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously grew up watching him, and just he was just a fierce competitor that didn't hold back. He was never the guy to, he was always clean. He did things the right way until he felt like he had to do something in retaliation maybe, or get somebody back, or racing against somebody that had raced him the wrong way previously. But I feel like he always did the right thing. He taught me a lot from the few times that we got to race against each other. He never put himself in the wrong spot. And I felt like he just he was a wizard at this stuff, and growing up watching him, you wanted to be like him, even if you didn't like him. And some days I didn't like watching him because he was so good that I didn't like watching him, and that was just the way it was. So it's definitely crazy that on just how fast things can change.
Kyle Busch telling a young one like it was in Connor Zilic, and again, that was just Kyle Busch for you. What else was Kyle Busch? Kyle was brash sometimes, particularly in his younger years. He was always aggressive, and he loved to stir the pot or play the villain when he could, when he was in race mode. But there was another whole side to him that a lot of people didn't always get to see. It developed as his younger kids, Brexton and Lennox, grew older, and both Michael McDowell and Joey Logano referenced this. It was a playground basketball game with Kyle from Talladega a month ago that was really the last memory that stuck with them in regards to Kyle and the family. And I asked Joey Logano at the end, how will you remember the on-track battles? Joey said, it's more things like that basketball game that he'll remember. Here's more from Joey Logano, one of Kyle's longest-term rivals.
You and Brad are the two that come to mind maybe as the two that had your most public buttings of head with Kyle over the years. You were his teammate, raced alongside him early on. You raced against him more than that. How will you remember the battles, and maybe how does that perspective change in light of all this?
Yeah, I feel like I've always been the kind of person that wants to see the best, right, of anybody. And like I said, Kyle had a lot of great traits. And, the memories on track, obviously they'll be there, but racing isn't what life is. You know what I mean? Like, I know we all get consumed in this stuff, and it is a great sport, and it's done a lot for my family. It's done a lot for everybody's here, and the fans and the joy it brings for everybody, absolutely. But it's not everything. It's not what makes you as a person. And I think that's important to remember throughout these type of moments. And the moments that, I'll probably remember some of the most is like Michael was talking about earlier when we were playing basketball or just, cutting up with each other or giving each other a hard time, right? There was a lot of moments where we just picked on each other, right? Like, and it was, you kind of, it's sad to lose that guy that we had those moments with, right? And moments like this, you learn to appreciate those things too, right? Because as much as at times he frustrated me and made me mad, it's kind of sad to lose that. It's kind of like a Tom and Jerry kind of situation, and you kind of miss when you don't have that guy to do that with anymore. But definitely, like I said, and we had that respect for each other in that same way. It's just, like I said, it's really sad. But those are probably the memories that will stick with me as much as anything that happens on track.
When you look beyond the driving and everything that Kyle did for himself on the racetrack, the other thing we think about is his legacy in the sport, his impact as a team owner and a mentor for drivers, many of whom he's catapulted into the Cup Series through what was Kyle Busch Motorsports. You think of drivers like William Byron, John Hunter Nemechek, Eric Jones, Christopher Bell, Todd Gilliland, Noah Gragson. There's more out there. All of those, though, now race at the Cup Series level in large part because of Kyle Busch. I wrote something in my column on Steering Wheel Nation. Regardless of whatever emotions he evoked in people watching him, Busch was someone who garnered respect, in part because of his statistics, but more so because he helped elevate the fire of those he competed against on the racetrack. Caden Honeycutt, who finished second in the truck race Sunday at Charlotte, never drove for Kyle, but embodied exactly what I wrote, that competing against Kyle provided the benchmark of what it takes for those that want to race in the Cup Series. Here's Caden.
You were
talking a minute ago with Sirius about everything he meant to you just from watching him and being a part of it. How do you sum up what he meant to you, to this series, to this sport?
Yeah, he was a butt kicker for sure. All of us, and we needed him. We needed him. If we ever wanted to race on a Sunday, we had to figure out how to compete against people like him and Ross and everyone that comes back here in the truck series to compete against him on Sunday if we have the opportunity to. So that's what Kyle was great at for us. He would teach us how to be good on Sundays if we ever got the opportunity. So and he was the best to probably ever do it in NASCAR, regardless of championships. He just the accomplishments can hardly be touched by him.
How did he drive you? And I covered for years Kyle Busch. But I'm not a competitor. I'm not behind the wheel. How did he drive you to excellence? What did he do that made you young drivers come up knowing that you would give in a different way if you were Kyle Busch and learning from him?
Yeah, I mean, I think his presence is what made us want to beat him so bad, just because he's won everything you could possibly imagine. He's whooped our butts every single week, every time he came in the truck series, and that would definitely be missed. And whenever you watch back races, FMT and things, you'll see what he's doing, so that way you can try to beat him if you ever had the opportunity to again. I wish we got to do that this weekend. I felt like this was one of my better tracks I can actually compete against him, and unfortunately we won't have the opportunity to again. But just a tough weekend for everybody.
Did you just find a line? What did he do? Did he, not give up? You from the behind the wheel perspective, watching him, racing him.
Yeah, I mean, he never gave up. He was, like I said, he was very methodical with his inputs and the way he thought about races. He never put himself in bad situations, and that's why he was so successful.
Caden Honeycutt, one of the classiest young racers that is kind of in the minor leagues, if you will, in the truck series, who I spoke with him this past Wednesday at Millbridge and just had a chance to meet his dad for the first time as well. I can see where Caden gets his best qualities from. The Honeycutt family has been very supportive of him, but they taught him early on that if you're going to make it, if you're going to get to where you want to go, it's not going to be on our money. We don't have it. You're going to have to work for it. You're going to have to win. You're going to have to earn it. And all of those are qualities that I think Kyle Busch had as well. And so very thankful for those remarks from the drivers. And we're going to come back with more of our celebration of the life and career of Kyle Busch right after this.
For race fans across the United States, GetInTheStands.com is the place to find racetracks where you live and where you're traveling. Just go to GetInTheStands.com and enter your location. You'll see the tracks within 100 miles of that point, either as a list or on a map. GetInTheStands.com is 100% free to use and mobile friendly. So whether you're on a computer, a tablet, or on your phone, there's no need to download an app. To find racetracks across the United States, open your web browser and head to GetInTheStands.com. GetInTheStands.com, your racetrack directory.
Attention track and series owners, elevate your fan experience with the TrackTune app. TrackTune works with your PA system. Fans and teams at the track can hear the announcers through their phones, ensuring everyone hears race calls, sponsor plugs, and more during race nights. It's simple to set up, affordable, and free for fans to download and enjoy. Visit tracktune.live for all the details and join tracks nationwide on the app today.
MillerTech builds lithium batteries for RVs, golf carts, boats, and off-grid life. Reliable power, long lifespan, and a 10-year warranty. That's why I trust MillerTech. MillerTech, powering your adventure.
Welcome back to the show. And as we move into our last lap segment here and continue to talk about Kyle Busch and share thoughts of the weekend that was at Charlotte on Coke 600 weekend, Jacob, one of the things that makes the weekend so special for you and I is that, we're as much a fan of what else is going on in the racing world on Memorial Day weekend as we are what's going on in front of us at Charlotte. But of course, on Saturday, again, just another miserable day. Finally got the O'Reilly Auto Parts race in that day, but boy, it was rain shortened, and it the whole day just seemed like a day to forget, frankly. And Sunday morning dawned, and this is I always call it Motorsports Christmas. This is this is Indy, this is F1, this is Charlotte, NASCAR. It's short track stuff that hangs around, and going into it just, as much as we watched Indy, we enjoyed Indy, and the tributes to Kyle extended to Indy. Again, it just all sort of felt like going through the motions for me.
It did. It did for me too. Just the overarching, I think it was the shock value. We were all still in shock even as we got to Sunday. And it just kind of, I don't want to say took away from the racing, but just certainly diminished the normal excitement for the racing in my mind. And then you settle in, you get ready for the 600. Of course, this was after we had the truck race Sunday morning, won by Lane Riggs, who honored Kyle with the signature bow after he won that race. And then you get to Cup Series pre-race, which is always powerful. And we got one more just total gut punch, Tom. I certainly was not expecting, I'm not sure any of us were expecting the portion of pre-race where Steve O'Donnell and the entire grid kind of wrapped around the Busch family, Samantha and kids included. Nobody would have blamed Samantha if she hadn't been there. I think it spoke to how strong that family is that they were there, and just the love and emotion and support that was poured into them from everybody involved. I mean, that about broke me. That was so powerful and just so haunting, that whole sequence.
Yeah, it was. And I, just thinking back on the day itself, I mean, as we got into the Indy 500 broadcast, and we were all sort of paying attention to that. The weather in Charlotte around us, all of a sudden the skies got brighter, and that big ball that shines so much light on us called the sun, that had been so invisible for the last 2 days, suddenly broke through the clouds. And it was, for me, it was uplifting just to see that, okay, it looks like we might be all right with this. And of course, all of that, the Brad Paisley concert, and now you're into pre-race, and as you say, just we had not been warned, and that the Busch family, Samantha and Lennox and Brexton and Kurt and Kurt and Kyle's parents, just for them to have the strength and the courage to make an appearance, and to watch that whole sequence with, again, appropriate, beautiful words from Steve O'Donnell, and the Amazing Grace bagpipe from the Charlotte Fire Department pipe band, which always makes me cry anyway. That was just, it was beyond anything that I think I've ever felt at a NASCAR race, honestly, and led us right up to the moment that the Coke 600 started. And I think throwing the green, honestly, Jacob, and seeing cars racing was a bit of a soothing balm, honestly, and allowed us all to just collectively breathe and focus on what's going on in the racetrack.
And it was an exciting race, don't get me wrong. There were a lot of twists, a lot of different players, even if most of it was one manufacturer. But by the end, to see Ryan Sparks and Spire Motorsports be brave enough to take a chance, which Kyle was known for sometimes on days when he didn't have the best race car. But for Daniel Suarez, a driver who drove for KBM, a driver who Kyle mentored, to win that race for the team that bought KBM from Kyle 3 years ago, Hollywood, who could have written that script, right? It all came together perfectly. And I think that result was the moment where I looked at it and I said to myself, okay, it might take a bit, but we're going to be okay again.
Yeah. Again, so appropriate, right? The Lord works in mysterious ways. And same truck number, same, team that Kyle won his last race with. And again, the former KBM team that Spire now owns. And it was a very heavy, very, very sad, somber weekend for all of us to go through. And as we start trying to process this, I think about how I'm going to remember Kyle Busch, but I'll let you have the first minute or so to talk about that from your own perspective.
I'm going to remember Kyle Busch as the straw that stirred the drink in the best possible way. He was not afraid to make noise. He was not afraid to get fans to make noise, but he was also the guy who had no qualms about putting the pedal to the floor and sometimes through the floor. He did so much more for this sport than just win. He gave the sport both a hero and a villain simultaneously, a hero for all of his fans and for so many of the drivers that looked up to him, and a villain for the fans that loved to hate him, as we've seen so many say over the years. Kyle Busch very much, I think, is one of the last larger-than-life personalities that NASCAR has had in the last quarter century, and I think to me that's what we lose, and it's a really hard thing to find from somebody else. I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss everything that Kyle brought to the sport. There's too many facets.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that, and I'm going to add that I'm going to remember him most as I kind of saw him most in the most recent times as a dad. I'm going to remember him at Millbridge with Brexton and racing himself, and how much fun he was having, and how he was able to just go and be a dad. Nobody at Millbridge ever makes much of the Cup racers that are in that situation, which is a credit to the fan base there and the people there. They're there to race and have fun with their kids. They're not there to sign your autograph and do all those things. But I had a chance to interview Kyle after a summer shootout race at Charlotte in a legend car that he won. He was great. I mean, he just seems so happy. That's what I'm going to carry away from this, is the fact that Kyle Busch, I believe, in his final days, Kyle Busch was as happy as he's ever been. He was a father proud of his kids. He was a husband so thankful for his wife and all that they had been through to be able to have those kids and to become parents. And he, although, I'm sure he wanted to win more, he was also at a place in his career where I think he was, certainly a different Kyle Busch. He was mellowed slightly, but still had that fire, and it was probably the best Kyle Busch all around. And so I'm just going to remember the impact he had on so many people in the sport at all levels, and that's how I'm going to remember Kyle Busch. And we will close the show that way. For more great content, steeringwheelnation.com. Until next time, I'm Tom Baker. Thanks for watching.
Yeah.